Good afternoon to all of you based in Europe, and good morning to our US participants. I'm Philippe Lemons, I'm your host for today, and I'm really happy to welcome you all to this webinar. So let's begin with a few housekeeping notes. Today's conversation is being recorded and will be distributed after the webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions pane in the control panel on the right-hand side, and questions will be answered during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So now let's meet our first featured speaker and panelist, Ingrid Maas. Ingrid is the co-founder of Innovigate Life Sciences Consulting. Her clients include the top 20 pharmaceutical companies, as well as medtech and digital health companies. Ingrid helps them strategize their product and service offerings in the ever-changing healthcare ecosystem. So Ingrid, please, you're on.
Thank you, Philippe, for the introduction. And in fact, today I will talk about the role of digital health in outcomes and early value generation. So a quick introduction of who we are, what we do, then we will zoom into what are today's digital health needs, and more specifically in terms of outcomes and value generating opportunities. Also, we'll talk about what should be then a good digital health solution and what are the key requirements. And finally, we'll talk about the benefits of a digital health solution and some key takeaways. Okay. So, like Philippe has introduced, we are a specialized strategy and management advice company, and we are helping clients to innovate and navigate in an ever complex health ecosystem. Today's challenges and changes are changing, in fact, the health ecosystem drastically, and we help, in fact, multiple stakeholders to be an active and winning player in this space. We are based in Antwerp in Belgium and also based in Basel in Switzerland. And we work throughout an extensive network of sector specialists to help companies and stakeholders to further develop their businesses. We work for the pharmaceutical companies, for biotech companies, but also for medical device and medical product players. We also work for the health and academic research companies or players, and also for clinical labs and diagnostic players. And nowadays, a lot of new players coming into the healthcare ecosystem. Everything starts with very deep industry insight, and doing deep insight analysis is the core of our business. And based on that, we develop strategy, business plans, and also support and valuation of businesses. Beside that, we help with program management and change management, also business model design and realignment, and also business process designs. Now, moving into the digital health space, well, we see that nowadays multiple players are focusing on the development of their digital health strategies. Digital health offers new opportunities, and especially in the area of outcomes and value generation. We see four main forces that are shaping the health ecosystem. On one side, we see more and more a need for evidence and outcomes. And we can say that the healthcare space is more driven by outcomes-based and evidence-based decisions. And it's also referred very often as value-based healthcare. Secondly, we see that integrating technology and also aggregating and combining dispersed data is a next trend to be observed. And that's, by the way, all over the globe. And we see that more and more data is combined, is aggregated, is further enriched. And the use of technology, and especially digital technology, to further collect information, collect data, to further enrich existing databases. As a third major driver that we see is further ecosystem stakeholder collaboration. None of the stakeholders can act on themselves. More and more collaboration is required, and also on top, co-creation is required. And I will explain a bit later how exactly and which kind of stakeholders should co-create and work further together. And as the fourth driver and trend in the sector is more and more consumer and consumer engagement, which is required. each of us is acting more and more as a consumer in the health ecosystem. And we have our own preferences, our own way of living and thinking and acting. So more and more we act as a consumer and decide on what our preferences are and which type of healthcare or treatments that we want. And this shifts, in fact, also decision-making more and more to the patient. So we can say that these four driving forces are putting more and more the patient at the center of the ecosystem. Now, this means also with all these changes and all these strong drivers that are acting together today, that we have to move, in fact, or will move more and more towards a world where everything will be around outcomes. The outcomes will be the key central point that will organize the whole ecosystem. This also means that companies will have to switch from just selling products to more and more selling and managing outcomes. And also care providers will have to shift from delivering interventions to delivering outcomes. So the need is, in fact, for all the players and the problem originating this need. Well, we see that today, to be able to deliver personalized healthcare, different stakeholders will have to work together. Digital health will be a major enabler in that, although care collaboration is not that easy. We also see that data collection and monitoring with the patient at the center is difficult, especially for pharmaceutical companies that are prevented to contact patients and to obtain patients' data directly. It's not allowing them, or it makes it very difficult to do. Also, we see that data ownership, data privacy, protection of personal data, especially in Europe than the GDPR regulations, and also data security makes it more complicated. Also, more effective and efficient health and disease management is needed, and especially patients are requesting this, but also our healthcare budgets require a more effective spending. And then the last topic, also faster patient access to new treatments. We're dealing with now new innovations that are coming to the market. Think about cell and gene therapies. Patients want to have access to these potentially curing and true curing treatments. And of course, it implies a lot of or high spending on healthcare budgets. And of course, this has to be further supported and facilitated. So we can say that the need, in fact, for precision medicine to treat the needs of each individual patient is required, but also outcomes business model is required, which means data collection and monitoring with the patient at the center, also with integrating solutions along the whole patient pathway, and care collaboration and coordination along this patient pathway, but certainly also, and that's more important for care providers, patient experience and satisfaction. Also important is a move towards dynamic patient-centered consent management. And we've seen today also big issues with some of the digital health or digital players in a broad sense. And patients request more and more to organize their data themselves and decide themselves whether they want to share their data in a dynamic way. And patient engagement, of course, is important, especially when it has to be used, or digital health platforms have to be used as health coaches. Applying digital health is not that easy. There are a couple of challenges. However, there is also a lot of advantages that digital health can offer. First of all, personalization, patient engagement are all possibilities to be delivered through a digital health solution. Also, better outcomes and disease management can be offered together with effective prevention on the longer term, and also more efficient and sustainable healthcare, and especially then to manage better the healthcare cost. On the other side, like I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of challenges associated with data and data protection, data ownership, but also the legal framework. Digital health is a new topic in the healthcare space, which requires also further a legal framework to be developed. And also patient safety and liability issues can pose some problems. A very important problem is the interoperability, especially between digital health solutions and existing, let's think about hospital management systems, electronic medical records. So interfacing is absolutely required. And also adoption among the healthcare professionals. Some are very advanced and are very open to it, others are less. Now, looking to what are the requirements for a good digital health solution. Well, if we look to today's situation, a lot of the pharma companies and of course also health medical device companies, they have their portfolios of products and solutions, and also healthcare providers, hospitals, home hospitalization or home care providers have of course their range of services that they offer. Now, without a patient-centric digital health solution that accompanies, in fact, their portfolio, it will be extremely difficult to obtain the best health outcomes for patients. So the digital health solution is a necessity in being able to achieve the best outcomes for patients, and also to be able to build a patient-centric outcomes business model. In the future healthcare ecosystem, companies, healthcare providers will have to compete on outcomes. With more and more pressure on healthcare budgets, the only way to win this market will be based on being able to deliver the best outcomes for each of the patients that are treated with their portfolio. So you can say that, in fact, an integrated digital patient-centric solution is required as a kind of 360-degree toolkit for value-based healthcare. There are multiple applications along the product lifecycle for digital health. It can start from research, for instance, information on or data on digital biomarkers, collection of biomarkers, investigation of biomarkers, and the use of these insights could already be very helpful in research, and especially also for retrospective analysis. In clinical development, digital platforms and digital health solutions are very valuable to collect patient information, patient-reported outcomes, but also all kinds of key opinion leader information or investigator engagement, also for real-world evidence, of course, or monitoring in a broader sense. Also in market access, the role of digital health solution is very critical or will become more critical. Especially to populate registries, to demonstrate real-world evidence and performance or even outcomes. Also to collect patient-reported outcomes, and in general to perform value-based healthcare. In commercial, there are multiple applications for digital health solutions. For instance, as a complement to a product, as more like a beyond-the-pill solution, but also in case of disease management and truly supporting patients in reaching better health outcomes. Also to collect patient-reported outcomes and real-world evidence, but also to apply in practice digital biomarkers to support better disease management, and many more other applications. Also towards end of product lifecycle, digital health solutions can provide additional benefits. Now, more and more companies are looking for earlier value generation and value creation. So how to create more value around a product or a portfolio of products? Well, there are multiple options there. Companies could think about the use of digital health and also called digitals as a complement to their product or portfolio, but also patient data and evidence integration is another opportunity, together with the use of digital health in a complement to breakthrough innovations. Think about gene and cell therapies, for example, or also CAR-T or immunotherapies, and also to support further funding models. Another option could be innovative care models, remote care, but also home hospitalization, where digital platforms is a mandatory component. Also conditional approvals, think about life licensing and life approvals of products onto the market. And lastly, also in the area of prevention and early disease interception, where an earlier diagnosis can be made compared to today by monitoring patient status and monitoring certain biomarkers or even digital biomarkers. So these 6 components, the 6 opportunities, are essential or will become essential for value-based healthcare in further delivering and improving outcomes, but also in general in increasing value for all the different stakeholders involved. To be valuable, in fact, we have to consider about building a more generic solution. If we look from the perspective also of hospitals that have to integrate multiple digital health solutions, it becomes a very complicated challenge. So we have to think about building a more patient-centric digital health solution as a kind of platform solution on which multiple applications and uses can run. That means also supporting along the whole patient journey and the whole product lifecycle, but also a good platform to apply outcomes and disease management based on the collection and analysis of various types of parameters like physiological performance, but also mental data. And also to organize care and organize care collaboration or coordination. And of course, also to demonstrate value and offer or deliver value for all the involved players around the patient. Now, looking for such further in detail for such a platform or a solution, there are a couple of very important functions that have to be supported. Think about patient interaction and engagement, keeping patients motivated to further be adherent to their treatment, but also care pathway optimization in terms of as well clinical performance as cost elements. Also care collaboration and workflow efficiency for especially healthcare professionals, and also disease and medication management, which is of course a very important function in going forward, and of course also data collection and reuse of data. So this will be very important patient-centric solutions and functions that have to be built on a digital health platform. What you see here on this scheme is an overview of how such a platform might be a central use or central tool for multiple players around the patient. Of course, it has to provide collaboration and coordination with care providers, but also with providers of products like pharmaceutical products or medical devices. And it has, of course, also to be integrated in electronic health records. Or in the patient personal health record. The various functions that I explained in previous slides are, of course, to be delivered on this solution. And in fact, the solution can then act as a digital patient coach. Of course, very much tailored to the individual patient, which means adapted to the patient's personal preferences, his behaviors, motivations, and needs, so that the platform can be used on a regular basis and can really help and support the patient at each time, motivate him also to keep on using it so that the best outcomes for his treatment can be realized. So we can say that this solution should be really integrated into a patient-centric care provision around the patient, and this requires also a more ecosystem approach along the patient journey. Now, looking to the last topic, which is more on the benefits of such a solution. So a couple of things. In fact, there are benefits for each of the involved stakeholders. For patients, it allows them to have ownership of their data and participation. Also, it provides personalized information and personalized care. And personalized information, especially then depending on where they are in their care pathway, information adapted to their situation and what their needs are, but also convenient access to healthcare professionals if they want to interact, and also a clear focus on what is most important to them, which is their quality of life. And we could think about integrating patient-reported questionnaires or even mobile health solutions focusing on quality of life. For healthcare providers, hospitals, but also individual doctors, data integration and analysis is a way for them to further do care pathway optimization, but also in terms of care coordination, providing remote care, home care, but also in terms of more medication, better or improved medication management. And as a last point, very important for healthcare professionals also, fully integrated in their workflows, which allows them also to have an optimal workflow efficiency. And that means performing certain tasks already before a doctor meets the patient, collecting already certain information, certain data that makes, in fact, the interaction with the patient and the interaction between the healthcare provider and the patient way more valuable. And then the last group of stakeholders, the benefits for industry, and that can be, of course, pharmaceutical companies, medical devices, but also clinical research organizations. It allows them to collect patient-reported outcomes and real-world evidence, also supports industry to further improve outcomes based on better disease management, but also earlier value creation and improved patient engagement. So we can say that the solution improves outcomes for all the different players, for each of the different stakeholders involved in the health ecosystem. So we can say that digital health solution offers a lot of benefits and opportunities in going forward and meeting, in fact, the different challenges and trends in the sector. So 5 key questions for yourself to ask to shape your own digital strategy and become further more successful. So you have to think about, how can I demonstrate value to each of the stakeholders, and what can the role of digital health be in that context? Secondly, also, how do I leverage digital platforms to harness new sources of data and get insights, in fact, to power my clinical research and improve patient outcomes? But also, as a third point, how can I use digital platforms to create new relationships and more intensive relationships or engagements, promote further conversation and interactions with customers? And as a fourth question, also to consider is, and how can I deploy commercial engagement model innovation, especially for pharmaceutical companies and also for medical device companies? It's important that new commercial engagement models can be applied to meet the changing needs of patients and healthcare providers. And as last topic is then to consider how to navigate this changing landscape and to gain access to both providers and also a greater patient volume. So that means that there are 5 main elements that needs to be further focused on, and we can say this is in fact a kind of a toolbox, a business toolbox based on 5 key instruments that should be used to become further successful in the future health ecosystem. Digital health can support to demonstrate value to each of the stakeholders. Of course, digital health leverages technology and also new data sources to power outcomes. Also, of course, to engage and enable shared decision-making with patients, with payers and providers. And also promote a new type of commercial engagement model and innovate, in fact, on the commercial engagement model. And last but not least, also to improve navigation and setting up new partnerships and collaborations across multiple stakeholders to gain access to patients and provide the best outcome for them. So each of these 5 tools in the toolbox will support improved outcomes for patients and also a true consumer-centric ecosystem. So with that, I would like to end the presentation. Hope you find this presentation interesting, and especially then to see how a digital health platform is an essential part of the new business toolbox. Doing business in the future in the health ecosystem without the digital health component will be extremely difficult to demonstrate outcomes or to even compete on outcomes. So Philippe, I would like to hand over to you back again.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Thank you. So, dear participants, as already mentioned, if you have any questions for Ingrid, please type them in the questions pane in the webinar control panel on the right-hand side, and Ingrid will answer them during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. I'd like now to move on to our second speaker, who's Vincent Quenin, our CEO and the founder of Mancera. Vincent, the stage is yours.
So yeah, I'm the founder of Andamant7, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm currently in Boston, so there's a lot of snow here, and we have a very international webinar today with part of the team from Brussels, part of the team in San Francisco, part of the team in Boston. So yeah, thank you to technology. To show you, to tell you a bit about the story behind Andamant7 and why we started all of this, we prepared a small video. We thought that it would be a different media and interesting for you to watch. It's very short, it's 2.5 minutes. And the team will start the video in a few seconds. And of course, I will be here for the whole webinar, and I will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. So as Philip said, please ask your questions through the tool, and yeah, we'll be happy to answer. So yeah, you can, talking to the team now, you can launch the video explaining the story of Andamant7.
Hello, I'm Vincent. I'm the founder of Andamant7, and today I want to tell you about the use of Andamant7 for medical research and for the pharma industry. First, it's very important to strike a right balance between privacy and data availability. So all the data that the patient share go always through the consent of the patient. If a pharma industry is sending questionnaires to a patient, the patient is presented with a consent form which they have to sign, and that will give them very clearly information about what data they will share with the researcher. So it's very important to have that right balance. Now, why is it important to have a lot of information? Well, to find new medication, it's very important to collect very important data, not only medical data, but also real-world evidence, subjective data, quality of life data. More and more patients are chronic patients today, and some of them have multiple conditions. So this is why Andamant is not a one-condition solution. It's a global solution to allow the collection of data between patients and the research industry. So real-world evidence, patient-reported outcomes, all of those are very important and can be enabled by Andamant as a platform. So if you have a project, if you want to do a clinical trial, phase 3 or late phases or post-market study, feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to tell you how we can save money with the trial and significantly speed it up.
So let's now move on to our third panelist. David Levesque is Andamant7's VP of Sales for North America and is based in Silicon Valley. And we are now making David our presenter. And he will explain you how Andamant7 brings value in the ePro space. So David, it's yours.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. I am David Levesque from Andamant7. It's great to be connected with you, and thank you for joining us today. I'll be sharing about Andamant7's current projects and the benefits of our unique health platform for sponsors, CROs, and patients. Andamant7 is a unique digital health platform for empowering patients, managing diseases, and measuring outcomes. It is used for clinical trials and care delivery for all healthcare conditions. Andamant7 works with all data types, such as images, documents, surveys, and structured data. The platform handles all data formats, such as text, PDFs, and video. It also works with many protocols, such as FHIR, HL7, and codification systems, such as LOINC and SNOMED. Additionally, Andamant7 integrates data from many sources, including EHRs, labs, connected devices, and of course, from patients. This diagram also shows that the Advanced Health Information Exchange platform manages pseudo-anonymization for clinical trials and non-anonymization for care delivery. Here are 3 screenshots of the patient's experience. In the leftmost image, you can see the personal health record that empowers patients with access and control of their health information. The middle screen shows our customizable ePro clinical trial data collection ability. that makes study participation easy for patients, CROs, and sponsors. Andaman 7's advanced ePro solution can integrate endpoints from the PHR, such as images, weight, and heart rate, as you see here. The image on the right shows why patients and sponsors trust Andaman 7 to manage their sensitive health data. This simple green toggle button shows how easy it is for patients to control who has access to their health data. Here you can see the patient has stopped sharing their data with Dr. Jim Jones. They are sharing their data with a pharma company because they're in a trial, and with their doctor, Dr. Smith. Andaman 7 is perfectly suited to help CROs and sponsors handle the increasing privacy, security, and traceability requirements through our health intermediation platform. Here's another screenshot to show how easily the app displays and manages many different types of data. Whether you're collecting sleep, steps, images, and documents, rest assured the Andaman 7 will get you the data you need to make your study and treatment a success. Andaman 7's current customers and partners appreciate our focus on making research faster, more cost-effective, and more patient-centric. We are working with big pharma and med device companies, as well as research institutions, such as the world-famous EORTC. We are also helping the European Commission and the US government achieve their goals of empowered patients, health data liquidity, and improved outcomes. To that end, Andaman 7 is a technical partner on a 7-country European Commission project for interoperability, and we're also weeks away from launching integration with over 280 US health system EMRs. Here are just a few of the US health systems we are integrating with. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the patient's experience in the Andaman 7 application. I'll just take a moment here to bring up my phone screen. Philip, can you confirm you can see my phone screen?
Yes, we see your mobile screen, David.
Thank you. So here you see I have the app on the phone. I'll go ahead and tap on Andaman 7. And this is the home screen for any patient using the app. And here you see my record at the top and our demo record, which is identified as Paula Adams. When I tap on Paula Adams, you'll see the categories of health data that she has access to. And we'll go ahead and click on drugs, where you can see Paula's current and past medications. When I tap on blood tests or test results, you can see here we have a list of structured data from the lab and also images. I'll go ahead and tap on cholesterol and then tap on year, so you can easily look at a history of Paula's cholesterol over the past year. Data traceability is of course important, so when I click on the history, I can know the source of every piece of data in the system. I'll go ahead and click back again and take a look at the mammogram here and zoom in on the area of interest. And of course, again, the history is available here on where that image came from. You can see it's Dr. Smith at Sutter Health. So that gives you a sense of how easy it is for patients to see and manage their health data in the personal health record side of Andaman 7. And now let's go ahead and take a look at how we help life science sponsors in clinical trials. Since I was invited to the trial, I'm going to click on my record now. And you can see the screen looks very similar to Paula's screen, with the exception of a tile down below, which is the EORTC quality of life study. And here's the study questionnaire. And I can easily tap and answer the questions and go to the next screen. And of course, if there's any data that you need for your study that comes from the personal health record, which is attached to the EMR, we can collect that during the questionnaire as well. I'll just show you one more screen here, and then we'll open the floor for questions. This is a clinical trial process walking through the patient through every step of the trial. So here you can see their profile information, which questionnaire is due when, at what time, and the upcoming questionnaires. And just one more note, for a current trial that we're doing, we have built this interface where patients can make a notification if they have any flare-ups, any particular experiences with their disease that the trial sponsor wants to record on a regular basis. For instance, here they were asking for temperature, so I can either enter that manually or get it from a connected thermometer. So this concludes my demonstration for our presentation today. I look forward to answering all of your questions, and thank you for joining us.
So thank you, David, for this presentation. Let's now move on to the question and answers session. We have a few questions that came in. First one from Valerie, maybe to you, Ingrid. How to start with digital health? What should companies do first, and what next to be prepared?
Yeah, I think companies have first of all think about what kind of data they need to demonstrate value or demonstrate outcomes. So they have to build an inventory of their data needs. And when they have done that, they have to look to where the role of digital health can come in. For missing data that they need, in fact, to perform better outcome or to do outcome management or disease management, they can then look to what are then the data requirements that a digital solution have to provide. So it starts all from, of course, their product portfolio, their specific product needs, the data that is already available, and the elements of data that are missing. And that should be the starting point in defining the digital health solution.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Avinash, which is maybe for you, Vincent. You touched upon data and privacy. Can you elaborate more on what exactly is done to ensure a user's data is owned by the user and used responsibly by companies? And how is this different from what it all used to be in the past?
Yes, sure. The Endowment solution has been designed from the start to be on those two principles that the GDPR made very famous. It's privacy by default and security by design. So everything in Endowment has been built around these two principles. Now, the data that the user enters or collects is always comes with a trace of the data. So we know exactly what data, who has entered the data and when it was entered. No data can ever be modified or removed. There is a very strong traceability mechanism in Endowment 7 for that. And since the data is collected by the patient, automatically the system is very well aligned with all the privacy laws, right? Because all privacy laws apply mainly to people or companies using data from a given patient or citizen. In our case, the patient or the citizen is the one centralizing the data, collecting the data. He's the hub of the system, and he decides if he wants to share the data. There's two ways to share data, either by a decision that the patient is making, like, for example, I'm sharing the data of my children health record with my wife. I decide to share it. I push the data to my wife's phone. And the second way is to be invited, typically by a CRO or pharma or medical research actor or a hospital. And there they are asking permission or from me to get a copy of my data. And I will see very clearly on the Endowment screen what data I'm sharing with the entity, the researcher. Now, regarding the use that will be done with that, of course, there's always a very strict constraint with it. You know that GDPR and upcoming laws in the US always say that you have to clearly specify what type of data is shared and for what purpose, right? If you want to use the same data for another purpose, you cannot do that. You have to ask for new consents. So Endowment has been built to be able to provide those consent and those recurring consent or dynamic consent if you want, and to remove the consent if you don't want to share the data anymore. Now, will the companies use that responsibly? Well, there is a contract, an electronic contract between the company and the patient. So even if there's technical ways to go around that, the companies are under contract with the patient. So that's how it should be controlled.
Okay, so another question coming from Thomas. Could you please elaborate, maybe for you, Ingrid?
Okay.
Could you please elaborate on how to manage if a patient withdraws consent in the middle of a trial or at the end? how does that impact the study?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that's indeed something that will happen from time to time if we apply a complete dynamic consent management. So in going forward, we'll have to deal more with real-world studies. So society will ask to more and more increase the pressure of bringing products faster to market. And that means applying principles like life licensing, and that also requires, of course, more intensive observation in the market. And thanks to digital technologies, this will be possible, in fact, to collect more information. So a typical model as we see today, where we have a closed environment where we do a clinical trial, and we will move more and more step by step towards life licensing type of trials with more observational studies done going forward. And we see that already happening in the orphan drug space, but we will see that this will be further broadened also into the traditional types of medicine.
Thank you, Ingrid. Another question for you coming from Serge. Serge is asking, how do regulatory authorities view digital health, in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah. So also for the regulators, this is something new as well for EMA, as FDA, as the Chinese FDA or others. So this is a normal evolution in the market, that new innovations are coming onto into application, and of course regulations have to adapt to that. Now, my experience in working with these regulators and preparing a new type of regulations for new innovations, most of the time regulators are not the key barriers with explaining how you're doing things and why this is a better way of working. For instance, in including patient-reported outcomes, that makes, in fact, the case stronger. Explaining, in fact, why you do it is a good intermediate step. But with everything which is new, it requires adaptations of everybody. It requires joint learning also, how to include this kind of innovations. And in going forward, also regulations will be more and more adapted to this new way of working.
So I'm glad to see that we have many, many questions. I hope that we will be able to address many of those. Here we have another question coming from Avinash, who's asking, maybe for you, Vincent. Do you have any tips or insights on how young and scrappy startups can either compete or collaborate with bigger giants in the health space that are often slow moving, but still controlling a massive proportion of this space? And Ingrid, if you want to comment on that,
I will do. Vincent.
That's a very good question. Actually, we are also a startup somehow, and we also are being confronted to that. Well, I don't think there is a magic solution to that. It's part of the world as it is. There's larger companies being very strong and very stable and moving less fast, of course, and there's smaller companies moving faster, but with other features. So I think it's just a question of being relentless, being patient, and maybe also joining forces and partnerships, which may be a way forward, whereby bigger entities or bigger institutions can collaborate with startups and guide them through the process and making sure that regulations is taken care of and opening their networks. We see a lot of innovation labs in those pharma companies or medical device manufacturers. I think that's a good way to bridge the gap between the two. Of course, it's not a magic solution, obviously, but I think it's a step in the right direction. So, yeah. Talking to each other, going to conferences and innovation labs may be part of the solution. But Ingrid, do you have anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also what I mentioned during my presentation, the fifth tool in the toolbox, that's collaboration and partnerships. Also for the big companies that have a lot of resources available to look into new innovations and deploy them. We see that small companies, through collaborations with digital health players, can advance very quick. So it's not only big players that can apply this, it's certainly also a very nice opportunity, I believe, for small companies to make big steps. That means to make steps in terms of clinical development, including also digital health tools to include patient outcomes, which is a very important element, in fact, later on in demonstrating value for the patient. So in setting up collaborations of smaller biotechs with digital health players that can provide the digital health component, also small companies can benefit of this opportunity.
Correct.
Thank you. We have two questions coming from Olga. I'll read the first one. They're short, so I'll give you both questions at the same time, if you don't mind. Maybe for you, Ingrid, also. What is critical in the launch preparations of a new pharma product, e.g. oncology? And our next question is, what are the important differences that we see between those solutions in the US and in Europe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of, let's take the example, as you mentioned, of an oncology product. So there are a couple of challenges when you launch a product. So more and more payers are demanding for outcomes-based payment or performance-based payment schemes, which means that you have to demonstrate, as a manufacturer of the product, have to demonstrate outcomes in practice, in real world. That means you need, in fact, a component to complement your product to be able to collect this outcomes data. So in that sense, for launching a product, especially the first couple of years, and for instance, in Europe, this is very common that more and more outcomes-based payment schemes are applied, and where manufacturers have to demonstrate outcomes for the first 2 years after launch, for example. Well, this allows, in fact, to collect this data. Sometimes also payers demand to fulfill or to populate a registry. Well, a digital health solution also can be the intermediate, in fact, to collect information, collect outcome data, clinical or patient outcome data, and to populate the registry. Now, your second question, what are the differences between Europe and US? Well, in terms of moving to outcomes-based payment, that's very similar. And we see that, by the way, across the globe, that more and more payment based on demonstrated outcomes is becoming critical, especially then for more expensive products. This becomes more of a requirement. So that means also for US or Europe, it's a very similar situation where the ability to demonstrate outcomes will become more and more important. Companies that do that will be more competitive, will be more able, in fact, to compete with others, will also be able to demonstrate and optimize even outcomes for each individual patient. In the oncology space, in going forward, we see more and more also combination treatments. Combination of treatments, there are no clinical trials for that, so that's something that has to be observed in practice. So especially for combination treatments, being able to monitor outcomes or adverse effects and also impact on quality of life of patients is a requirement to further optimize the treatment according to what a patient can have.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe a question which is related to that and which comes from Marie. And David, you will also be able to elaborate on that, but maybe Vincent can start. Are hospitals opening up to sharing the data about patients they have? I guess the situation is different in Europe and in the States. So that's why I think that both of you maybe can give your views, share your views about that.
Yes, sure. So the question is, well, there's no single answer to that. There's a number of hospitals which are more open, or are less open. One of the big differences between US and Europe is that in the US there's more standardization coming up with FHIR interfaces and meaningful use 3 being imposed to hospitals. While in Europe, there are no such initiatives yet, and there is no standard protocol. So the situation is a lot more scattered in Europe, or less compatible. And the mentality of people also, it might be different. US care is private and with private insurance companies, while in Europe, there's a lot of social security or national social security. So that means there's different speeds of movement. I would say that the US is changing faster than Europe, and probably patients change doctors more often. So there is a more meaning to open up the data to patients, because they need to take their data to a new doctor. While in Europe, there's maybe a more traditional approach. So those would be some of the main elements I would see. David, what would you say?
Excellent points, Vincent. I would just add that, to add data to what you're saying, it's very clear that Apple and other companies are enabling patients to access their data. So, and as I showed, Animan 7 is also being able to do that. And so with the new meaningful use, as you mentioned, and the FHIR APIs, it's no longer the hospital's decision whether or not the patient has access to the data. It's simply the patient's decision to not only access their data, but also download it, have it where they can then control who they share it with. And that's what Animan 7 allows, and that's what the federal government of the United States wants to have happen, because they know that the slowness or the lack of interoperability of health information exchange is part of the challenge of the high costs and the low outcomes that we're getting here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We received a question from Peter. Digital health solutions are now often implemented in hospitals. Is there also a market for independent care providers? And if yes, how would you approach this?
Okay.
Ingrid?
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. I think also, like I mentioned in my presentation, it's not just a matter of pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies. Also, healthcare providers will have to compete on demonstrating better outcomes or making a better patient experience. So also for them, it's a way, in fact, to be more competitive, be more attractive for patients, and hence also to be in a better business shape. So that can be for hospitals to make the patient experience better organized, but also to support patients in collecting their data prior to the hospital visit, so that doctors can have their data available during a doctor visit. But also individual private practices can benefit of that in better coaching, supporting their patients, whether to prepare a meeting with a doctor or whether to further surveil patients in between doctor visits. Especially for home hospitalization players, this is a very interesting opportunity. It allows them also to organize and coordinate their care better and monitor their patients remotely on a much more intensive basis than they can ever do without technology.
Yeah, if I can add something, there's of course a big trend, which is patient empowerment, and the request from patients to know more about their conditions and to be able to follow them up. So that's one big trend. But the other big trend is also on continuity of care and outside of the hospital. So there was a seminar a few weeks ago from one of the large hospitals in Belgium, and they were talking about the future of medicine, which will happen a lot more outside of the hospital. And so they were wondering how they could establish partnerships with individual doctors, with home nurses, and all of those actors, first-line actors, sometimes they are called. So there is a better continuity of care around the patient. So that's another big trend that's also happening, which will probably have things move.
One of the things that's happened here in the States just in the last year is the ability for doctors to charge for remote patient monitoring with the new CPT code. So that's one way that the Medicare and Medicaid is encouraging doctors, first-line doctors and primary care doctors to adopt digital tools for monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Muriel is asking us also a question. What is really important to take into account if you want to change a standard of care treatment with your application? With the typical struggles of reimbursement, prescription need, and changes are decided by each single doctor and not by hospital policies.
Okay, I can start with that if you want. So in fact, that's indeed today's challenge, where multiple doctors, multiple healthcare professionals are supporting patients. on different aspects. Well, this kind of care collaboration and care coordination across different healthcare professionals is indeed a challenge today. Where digital health can come in and support that is, in fact, to provide information to each of the healthcare providers that are involved with a patient, so that, in fact, availability of the data all the time on insights in the patient and the data produced is possible. But also in terms of how to better organize diagnosis or even optimize disease management. Also there, the digital health component can play a crucial role. If you want to further personalize treatments, today it's complicated if multiple doctors are working around the patient in different locations from different organizations. Digital health allows, in fact, to cross borders between the different healthcare providers.
Yeah, and if I can comment on that also, Andaman is, for me, one of the first, if not the first, electronic health record that has been conceived as a distributed system. So it's a real strong paradigm shift, actually, because today you have EHR in hospitals that send and receive data to other systems, but they consider their system as the core, as the center. And then you have individual doctors that have also their own software. And then you have everybody that have their own system, and they kind of talk to each other, not very well today, but it's improving. And we created Andaman as a distributed system from its foundations. So anybody around the patient, including the spouse or the parents of the patient, can enter, and of course, the doctor and the nurses can enter data at the same time, and all of that information will be gradually exchanged with each other according to the access rights, of course. And so the distributed EHR is being enriched by several actors at the same time. So this is really a change of paradigm for health records. So in that sense, Andaman is, according to me, very different, has a very different approach to other systems. I hope that answers.
If I can also add, I would say that if I interpret the question correctly, I think it's also asking around how do you shift the standard of care? And I think based on Ingrid's comments, with better evidence and more evidence, you can show the doctors that the outcomes are in fact better for your treatment. And so that's how Andaman 7 or other digital outcome assessment tools can help you. I think another way to, what's super important in care, as we've talked about a little bit, is adherence to the protocol. And so empowering the patients and getting them involved in their own care through a tool like Andaman 7 or other tools you might use is by itself going to increase the efficacy and use of your treatment or intervention, whatever it might be. And there's data on this. You can look at opennotes.org, which is a nonprofit that does research on the effective outcomes on the patients being engaged in their care, specifically related to them having access to their data. And so I encourage you to check that out.
Okay, I see still 2 questions, unless there are other ones coming in, but maybe we are closing to an end now. So this question may be for you, Ingrid. How can you make sure that PRO are reliable while they are not validated by physicians?
Yeah, well, in fact, patient-reported outcomes, it's the word says itself, it's reported by patient. It's just a patient feedback. It's the voice of the customer, the voice of the patient. So that means it's just a perception and the input from the patient. So it's in fact very rich to have this kind of information, and it's not a good thing if a doctor will overrule this kind of information. That doesn't mean that the doctor's reported information is not valuable. It's only that the patient-reported outcome is then additional value, additional data that is generated and can be made use of. Similar to other industries, more and more the voice of the customer is considered. And in that sense, the healthcare is nothing else than the other sectors. It's important that the patient is heard right away, straight away, with the data that he wants to provide, how he sees it and how he feels it.
Yeah, if I can make a smaller comment on that, as a patient myself, like I have leukemia, right? CML, and I've been on Levesque, which is a very efficient medication for the past 10 years. So it's very obvious that the clinical evidence of this medication is excellent, right? It works for a large number of patients, and the outcomes are extremely good. And there's two competitors to that magic pill. So how does one reimburse those three pills, right? Because they all have the same clinical evidence. What's different might be the patient evidence, or the real world evidence, as it's sometimes called. So if the patient prefers one medication to the other because there are less side effects, or it's easier to take the treatment because it's only one pill per week instead of 3 pills per day, I don't know. There's many subjective and secondary elements that come into play. And that's where the patient or the real world evidence is a complement to the clinical evidence, especially for competitive drugs, which all have the same clinical benefits, clinical outcome.
I'll just add 2 more resources to help answer that question further. The ISPOR conference, ISPOR, is excellent in providing resources and data around how much data needs to be collected for PRO data and all data, but specifically PROs to have confidence in the data. And also ICHOM is a great international organization that's standardizing outcome measurements around the world and showing the efficacy and value of patient-reported outcome data.
Thank you. I see a last question here from Tom, which I think is a good one, maybe to close, because it brings you back to the reason of being of NMN7. So to you, Vincent, the question is the push towards patient-centric data ownership model. Will it happen or not? And what will drive this? Why are we convinced this will become the new norm?
Well, I cannot read the future, but I sure hope that it will happen. I see very strong trends, right? The patient empowerment movement and the request for patients to have all of their data is something real and very strong. Of course, not all patients want that, but a large number of patients want that. Suffice it to say that, or to realize that patients look on Google, on Wikipedia for information, which is not always a good idea. It has to be commented by doctors, but at least it shows that patients are looking for information and they want information. I can tell you that in my own case, and when my son Pierre was diagnosed with bone cancer, as parents, we were really looking for information and we wanted to have the best information. And we were also asking the doctors to verify that information. So it's not just pushing the doctors out. It's not at all about this. Doctors have a very important role, but the patient also has or the carer or caregiver of the patients, or the spouse or the close ones, also have a great importance, because they can collect the data as a hub, and they can transmit the data from one doctor to another, and make sure that everybody is concerned and well informed of the problem. So I really think that that it's changing on that point, that patients are being empowered. I also think that very good doctors wants that. For example, when my son was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, which is a pretty rare sickness, the doctor was very open and was even asking us or agreeing with us to ask for second advice. So we went to another hospital in another country, even in Paris, and our oncologist gave us all the details to share with the other oncologists, because they wanted to make sure that the diagnostic was good, which was critical, because for cancer, obviously, you have to go extremely fast and apply the best treatment as soon as possible. So if you make a wrong diagnosis, then it's a very significant problem, right? So in that case, the doctors were very open to have a second advice too. So I don't think that there's another way around than going forward in that direction. I think it will happen gradually, of course, and it's faster with some doctors and with others. But yeah, it's obvious. We are all working for the health of patients, right? Doctors, but also research and pharma companies. There's one goal, right? To improve health for every patient. So it has to go that way, I think.
So this was the last questions we received. So I would like to thank you all our panelists, but also all our participants for joining us today. This was our first webinar, and we are very compelled with all the reactions and also with all of the people who have supported us in organizing this first webinar. Obviously, we hope that this is the first one in a long series. So we really look forward to receiving not only your feedback, but also any ideas that you may have about topics that you would like us to address during upcoming webinars. So please do not hesitate to send us an email with your feedback. If you are interested in having a demo or test drive of Andaman, we are happy to organize that for you. And again, we hope to have contacts with you soon.
We wanted to simply invite everyone to download Andaman 7 from the iTunes store or from Google Play. It's available for you and your family to use as a resource for free all over the world. It's been downloaded in 35 countries. It's in 20 languages. So wherever you are in the world today, if you are caring for someone or caring for yourself, feel free to download the app and use it for free.
So this concludes the webinar for today. Vincent, anything to add?
Not especially. What David just said is very true. So install the app for yourself and your close one, your children, and so on. And if you are in the pharma industry or medical device industry, then you may be also interested in seeing what's specific about Andaman for that industry. And for that, you have to contact us. There's an email there on the screen, but you can also contact us through any means you find, and we can invite you to a demo clinical trial. So you will see how Andaman can combine both the interest of patients managing their own health and the interest of the research industry by collecting data from the patient, from the connected devices, from the EHRs that we are compatible with, from any kind of source of data, lab results also.
So thank you very much again. Every participant will receive tomorrow an email with a link to the recording of this webinar and also to the documents that were used in support of the presentation. So again, thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.